Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Diplomatic Corner. My name is Professor Brooke Hailubesha. I'm the producer and the director of this program of nahootv, Diplomatic Corner. And today, dear friends, I have for you a very distinguished guest. He is the country representative and director of the World Food Program in Ethiopia. And his name is His Excellency Mr. Claude Jibidar. Mr. Jibidar, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to appear in my show and to share some knowledge about work and profession about WFP. I'm sure our audience would be very, very much so interested about how and in what manner and ways WFP is operating in Ethiopia and assisting the Ethiopian people. Thank you once again. WFP is the largest humanitarian agency in the world, according to my research. And dear distinguished guests, Mr. Claude Jibidar, as the representative and country director of WFP, he brings with him 30 plus years of experience of non-profit and corporate leadership. He has a wide range of experience on food security, nutrition, emergency response strategies. He has been everywhere. You have been everywhere. I'll be very brief, by the way, because your resume, yes, you'll add up some more. You have been here in Ethiopia a year.
Yes.
And do you feel comfortable now in Ethiopia? Do you feel settled now after a year?
Ethiopia has become my second home, and I feel at home in Ethiopia.
Yeah. In what ways and manners?
In many ways. I mean, first and foremost, the whole attention of my daily activity is about Ethiopia and Ethiopian people, the people in Ethiopia who require assistance. So it's like being at home, waking up, and having to take care of, the people who rely on me, on all my colleagues, to support them. And you cannot do it from a distance. You have to be in the middle of it. So that's why I really feel at home in Ethiopia. And then I'm coming back to Ethiopia. Yes, because I did spend a few years in Ethiopia some time back.
Could you please kindly share your encounter, I would say, about with Ethiopia and life in Ethiopia years back?
I mean, the last one was in the 70s. I was a much younger man, and I was in Lycée Gebre Mariam from 1974 to 1977. Tough times.
Critical times in Ethiopian political history.
Critical time in Ethiopian political history. And then before that, I also had the opportunity of living a few years in Ethiopia when I was much younger, a year and a half old.
Wow.
And then spent a couple of years also in Ethiopia. And at the time, actually even learned Amharinya, which is the first language I spoke, but which I've totally forgotten.
Really?
Now.
As a baby, as a toddler here in Ethiopia?
Yes.
Wow.
But I've totally forgotten. So I need to get myself time and get back into learning and practicing Amharinya. So you see, Ethiopia is a bit like second home for me.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you for sharing this very personal, touching, your encounter, with Ethiopian people and Ethiopian life in your very, very early years. Thank you for doing that, really. In Ethiopia, 20.4 million people are in need of food assistance. I was checking your website at the moment. Among them, 4.5 million are IDPs, internally displaced persons. That's a huge number, all across the country, And then you, as WFP, as part of the UN, you aim to reach at least 11.5 million Ethiopians. That at least you had targeted in 2022, which was really 3 months ago. Isn't that a very huge task?
It is a huge task, but let me say that the role of WFP is to really come and support the government in its own action. I mean, obviously, WFP is an important key actor in the food assistance. But the primary actor is the government, which also is delivering huge level of assistance. And actually, we are three major partners, three major key actors: the government through EDRMC, GEOP, which is a consortium of international NGOs, and WFP. So we sort of share responsibility for provision of food assistance across the country. WFP, we have an additional role, which is more national, which covers all the areas, which is the treatment of moderate acute malnutrition, which is also the support to some school feeding activities. And then beyond the relief, we also try to work with communities to help and improve their livelihood. So we have some relief responsibilities in some parts of the country, and nationally, we have a role also to assist, in other activities. And let me also add that we have a key partner, two key partners, which is RRS, dealing with the refugees, and UNHCR. And WFP's role there is the provision of food assistance to all the refugees in the country.
Thank you. Thank you. Would I be correct to say you also deal with emergency response operations and activities?
Yes, yes. Okay. It's really the bulk of what we do, emergency response in most parts of the country.
Okay. Great, great. Now, at this juncture, I'm itching my fingers. I need to really go back and share a few things about yourself, and that is, when I was asking myself, how did you land to Ethiopia, the second populous country in Africa, a country which has issues of security, peace, stability, and also, food deficiency, with lack of peace, there's no food production. Farmers cannot work properly. So immediately it will impact food production. And then we have also this climate change and the like. It's very, very complicated. And then the political, at least for the last 2 years, now at least we have an agreement. Now, why? Because it's for the following reason. If I go back a little bit, before you started work in Ethiopia, you were in Chad, another, shall I say, challenged African country for a number of years. And you were leading a staff of 500 at the time. And before that, correct me whenever I'm wrong, by the way, you were in the Democratic Republic of the Congo from 2016 to 2020. Another huge task. And another example that I would like to pick from your very long resume is you were in Kabul, Afghanistan from 2013 to 2016. Another traveled area for decades, several decades already. And then you were in Dakar, Senegal from 2018 to 2013 as the Deputy Regional Director. You were responsible for 19 countries. Now you are here in Ethiopia. Would it be correct to say you are well equipped to dealing?
I think I do understand some of the challenges in terms of food and nutrition security that people are facing in Ethiopia. And we have seen that in a number of countries. You have named a number of countries. There are some commonalities to those countries. Unfortunately, a number of them have really been affected by conflict. Conflict has created displacement. Displacement means that people have to run away and lose everything. And I always try to remind people, or try to have people understand what it means being an IDP or being a refugee. It means that as you are now, Professor, today, as we are all here, suddenly you have to run away. You leave everything you have behind. You go with whatever you have, or sometimes you can take a few things. The only thing you take are your children, and you run away. You don't know where you're going, and you don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. Okay? So obviously, these people find themselves in very terrible situations. So that's why conflict is a common denominator to many, many of the food security problems we are facing. Now, in Ethiopia, I want to believe that we are going in the right direction. because when people ask me, how are things? I always say, I arrived a year ago. A year ago, it was terrible. Today, the problems are still there. There are still problems, but at least the prospect is much better. The second common denominator to some of these situations, if I think of Chad or I think of some of the West African countries, is really the drivers of climate change, the problems and the impact that climate change has. I mean, there are few places in the world where we are seeing it so vividly, like in Ethiopia, the problem of the drought. And the drought is becoming even a greater problem than conflict in many countries. But the thing is, and I think Ethiopia is an example that an end can be brought to conflict. And we have seen it. And we are really happy that it has happened. But one thing is, when it comes to the impact of climate change, I know it is not going to stop tomorrow. So that is why climate change has become one of the really important drivers of food insecurity. And Ethiopia is really at the middle of it, with northern Kenya, with Somalia, the whole of Africa. So this is a big, big challenge that needs to be addressed.
Even more than political conflicts,
Yeah, I mean, conflict obviously needs to be
resolved,
brought to an end, needs to be addressed. And I keep saying, you know, if there was a magical stick to stop conflicts, we would solve a huge percentage of some of the problems in Africa. But then there are other problems that we will still need to be dealing with.
Very, very well said. Very well said. So now we are in Ethiopia, and for our audience, you lead. You are the country director and rep for Ethiopia. You lead a staff of 1,200 people. It's huge. And you have over 17 field offices. That needs, coordination. That needs operation, day to day, even emergency and the like. If you could give us a bird's eye view of how you operate in Ethiopia.
I would say the first thing to me is really to have a common purpose for the 1,200 people. And I take it that's first and foremost my job, because it is all of those people, number of them here in Addis, and the others in the field offices that make it happen. So my role is really to make sure that we have this common purpose, which is how can we best assist the people who need it. Now, in all the various regions, the various field officers have a certain level of autonomy in making decisions as to how, where, and when they do prioritize the support. They work in full coordination with our regional government partners. The priorities are defined together. The assessments are carried out together. Then we work with the UN, the NGOs, and the communities to define those priorities. And then we deliver our food assistance through various mechanisms. Some of them are through the national or regional institutions in place. Some others are directly with the community. I mean, different ways of providing the food assistance.
Thank you. Very true. You bring into my thought the following, and that is, school feeding programs.
Yes.
Breakfast and lunch. I, as an Ethiopian American, as an Ethiopian, I would like to focus now, in line with what you have shared with me, about school feeding programs that were started in Ethiopia. At first in Addis Ababa. Families are not. Some are not in a good economic position to feed, even to make breakfast for their kids, and the kids go out to school with an empty stomach. They don't even have lunch, and they stay there the whole day. And a kid with an empty stomach, how could he learn? He dizziness, he might faint, he might not follow what the teacher is saying. And this program, which now covers, if I'm not wrong, 10 million Ethiopian school kids, which was started here in Addis but has expanded throughout the regions. And I came to know that WFP is assisting in this manner also. If you could relate to us, I will be very thankful how you assist in this operation.
Touching something that is so close to my heart. And my colleagues, they know that school feeding remains for me one of the top priorities. Why? Because I'm a parent. And here, I am talking to the parents. Which parent does not wake up in the morning and thinks of two priorities: the health and the education of the children? This is a top priority for every single parent, whether you're poor or you're rich. Which parent will want, if they could avoid, would want to send their children to school with an empty stomach? None. If children end up on an empty stomach, it's because the parents, they can't. And generally, if they could sacrifice, they even sacrifice for the children. So what it means is that, obviously, making sure that children who go to school can have a meal, I think is really important. And frankly, I really praise the government of Ethiopia for setting up the school feeding strategy, homegrown school feeding. I have not met a single regional president, because I met a few discussed, who has not talked about how much they are committed to taking forward school feeding. This is the future of the parents. This is the future of the country. I have been in South Omo, and I have met some of those tribal groups, like the Hammer, or some of those people that I used to see on the TV, on documentaries, and there was school feeding, And I mean, I was really proud and really moved to see how much those people were committed to have their children in school, and they were giving them some school meals through what WFP could assist with. But WFP's role is really to support the government in the government strategy to implement and develop school feeding. Millions of children are already at school. The government is putting money into that. The objective, if I understand well, is that every single primary school child in Ethiopia receives a meal. There is no developed country where there is no school feeding, where children go to school and don't have a meal. So it is a top priority. It is not, for me, it's not even something that needs to be argued. So it's about how do we do it? How do we make it happen? So WFP's role and the way we really want to take forward school feeding is to support what is being done at the region level. Because school feeding is something that should be adapted to the context. Okay? In terms of, first of all, what the regional government can afford. What you give in the school in France is not what you can give in a school in Ethiopia. So it has to be adapted to the context so that it is something that can be taken forward. So our role is really to try and come with our resources where we can complement what the government is doing. So that's really the way we want to take forward school feeding. And whenever we can, in areas where there is high levels of food insecurity, make sure that we can also support the families through food assistance. But you see, once again, the relief assistance is something that is meant to be short-term. Short-term. The reality is that very often we find ourselves having to continue this assistance because people are unable to take care of themselves. And some years back, I remember we were having this discussion with some colleagues in the West Africa region, and we all agreed that one thing that was really important in the way WFP, beyond responding to the humanitarian need, should be trying to aim at with the other partners is to see how we can assist African communities produce what they eat and eat what they produce. Let me explain. Produce what you eat. Basically, if you eat injera, produce teff. If you want to eat wheat, produce wheat. So that you can take care of yourself. If your land can produce only maize or sorghum, learn how to use maize in the various different ways. Get the best out of maize. You know, I remember that back in the 70s, there was no wheat in Ethiopia. I remember that the bread we were buying was out of maize.
Yes.
And it was good bread. I am buying today bread out of teff.
Yeah.
Which I actually even find better.
It's said to be more organic, you know. It's finding markets in America, even in the Western world, you know.
So
gluten-free as well.
Exactly. So, I mean, here the idea is really that one of the ways of looking at securing longer-term food and nutrition security is also helping communities being in a position to take care of themselves. I mean, experience has shown us when the price of wheat went up, some people will remember 2008, when the price of rice went up. West Africa, I'm from West Africa, we have become rice eaters. When the price of rice went up, because rice was being imported. So we suffered. We suffered. We are not yet to the point where we are producing enough rice for ourselves. But I think these are some of the things that when governments engage in those ways, WFP, FAO, IFAD, you know, other partners try to support the government, because we still believe that there is no development without food security. Somebody who wakes up, who is hungry, is not somebody who can dedicate the time, the resources to move ahead. So fundamentally, food security is one of the rights that we should really try to make sure that people meet. Now, conflict, drought, climate change, these are challenges. But challenges are there to be addressed.
Yes,
and overcome.
And absolutely, wise, very wise words, very wise. Which will bring me, you know, Mr. Claude Jibidar, to conflicts, of course. You know, the culprit is in conflict in so many countries. Afghanistan, even conflict since the late 1970s. My God, one of the you know, the longest conflicts in the world. And conflict is the absence of peace. That entails less food production, more people will shift, IDPs, refugees as well as internal IDPs. It will impact the economy. You know, the economy will be shaky, and conflict will also lead to destruction, loss of lives and property. That will bring me to northern Ethiopia. You were engaged before November 2020 as well in so many parts of Ethiopia, you know, and then in Tigray province as well. And November 2, that fateful day, officially, I would say 2020, the war started between the center, that's the federal government, and the rebel groups. And you were caught, WFP as an institution, were caught in this spin of fast forward kind of events. You know, you were involved, you wanted to help give assistance, food to the people of Tigray. They are part of Ethiopia, and the federal government also wants that. And then there were controversy about losing trucks, disappearing overnight, lack of, you know, continuously lack of delivery of food items and the like. And the WFP was involved in that. And if you could, you know, Asma, you're not here, of course, but if you could just, you know, share with us. The Ethiopian public were also divided. Some were saying WFP was involved, this and that. You know, there were so many things that were written about and reported in the broadcast media. For the record, you know, if you could share some of from your vantage point and from the position of WFP, how things developed and how it went.
wherever there is conflict, there are always these kinds of controversies, particularly when you're trying to assist everybody. But for me, the important is what the beneficiaries, the women who receive the assistance, whichever way they are, that's what really is important. Now, it is important that we don't let ourselves be caught in the political, dimension of things, because then otherwise it is the people that we are punishing. So that's why for me, the focus is, let's make sure that we deliver assistance to the people who need it. Throughout the conflict, WFP has been delivering assistance to the communities affected by the conflict in Afar, the communities affected by the conflict in Tigray, and the communities affected by the conflict in Amara, okay? Not to talk about the whole rest of Ethiopia, where we have also continued assistance, and we are continuing assistance today. So I don't want to be caught in the politics around it, because that's really shooting myself in the foot. Getting involved in that, and then it is the beneficiary that I am sacrificing.
Absolutely, a point well made.
And then let me also tell you one thing, okay? Because you say we have 17 field officers.
Yes.
We have field officers all over the country, okay? And my pride is that if you go to our field officers, you have people from all regional origins of Ethiopia in those field officers, delivering, doing the work, and who have been doing a tremendous work. So that's why, for me, primarily, it's really the team. And what the team has demonstrated to me is that beyond the conflict, the WFP team is ready to deliver assistance and has been delivering assistance.
As I well said, WFP, international UN, affiliated, program. And what's required is this professionalism, strict impartiality, balanced delivery, smooth delivery, and non-involvement in internal matters. There might be hiccups here and there. If there appear, then they will be corrected. There are problems. It will be corrected. And one thing. And the second thing, from what is Mr. Claude Jibidar, what is amazing about WFP is that it operates based on donors. So it means there is an involvement of individuals, companies, corporations, and sovereign countries. And on top of that, I was really amazed and touched when I looked at the statistics, when I found out that as number 27, and I was focusing on developing countries, Qatar, 5 million, and a little way down, and as 27 is Burundi, 1.8 million American dollars, it says. That is really touching. A developing country helping another poor folks all across the world. And then Sierra Leone, almost 191,000 American dollars. It tells us something. So how does this donor system work? How does it operate? And then how is the money dispersed across the world? And what's the criteria of allocating this amount of money for Ethiopia, this amount for Afghanistan, for Chad, etc., etc.?
Yes, all of these donors are, people without whom, WFP would not be operating. We do operate on a voluntary basis. Okay, so you've talked about a number of countries. Some of this is coming to Ethiopia, some are going to other countries, and so on. But the bottom line is, we seek donors' support for the programs that we want to implement. And they come forward on a voluntary basis. The resources we receive are resources that we use to buy food, either internationally, either locally when it is possible, because the purpose and objective of WFP's procurement strategy is that with every single dollar, we want to buy the largest possible quantity of food of the standard and quality that is set. So I know sometimes people say, oh, why don't you buy locally? Okay, why do you buy from abroad? Because our commitment with the person who is giving us that dollar is that with that dollar, we want to feed as many people as possible. That's the first objective. So that's why we have to go. But there are sometimes possibilities, options for us to buy locally. Over the last few years, we have been procuring in Ethiopia, okay, for maize, or beans, and so on. So money is used for buying and then for distributing. Sometimes we disburse cash. That is, instead of giving food, we give people money, and then with that money, they can access food in the market. And this sometimes is much more cost effective because we don't have to transport food, do all of that. It is something that can help the local economy, incentivize markets, make markets work, but we have to make sure that that injection of money does not disturb markets and does not create inflation. And part of the money is also used for covering our operational costs. I mean, you can imagine whenever you transport thousands of tons of food over hundreds of kilometers or thousands of kilometers, it does cost a lot of money. So that's why we often have large resources, because food assistance is a very expensive business because of the logistics of getting the commodities. And that's why in Ethiopia, we work a lot with commercial companies, okay? But because the whole setup, the whole capacity is not enough when we face situations of urgencies or emergencies like we've been having, that's why we also have our own fleet of trucks that complement the commercial transportation. And that's what has enabled us to respond quite massively to the needs in northern Ethiopia, but also in other parts of the country.
I found a certain kind of indicator, and that is 1 metric ton of food feeds for one day 1,660 people, and I was amazed.
Yes, you must be right.
No, I got it from the website and other websites, very credible ones, and that say, gee, 1 metric ton, 1,660, and then yes, for when you think about 2-3 times, it shows you the gravity and the weight, the weight of the delivery, the supply itself, First, how critical it is to saving lives, and second, it's just like your efforts are commendable, respected, and credible, but it's just still a drop in an ocean. It told me we are doing something, WFP, but still there are so many things to do, because the empirical evidence tells us that way, in black and white, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. More so that
yes.
You need to be feeding people every day.
Yes, continuously. Continuously.
Continuous. It's not something that you do today
and then go.
You stop. Okay? Yeah. Of course, we try to see and work with other partners.
Yes.
How we can help people take care of themselves.
Yeah.
But it is a commitment. It is a long-term commitment to support communities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where critical support, like helping farming communities to cultivate, is really important.
Exactly.
Because then, if people can cultivate, if they can harvest, then they can take care of themselves.
True.
Which means that we can then back off from the relief assistance.
Should be sustainable, and there's a degree of intensity and continuity as well.
Exactly.
Because you have to do with, say, fighting hunger, ending hunger, which is not easy, fighting famine, conflict and peace, and then a global food crisis. Just recently, exactly a year and a month ago, Ukraine and Russia, it had its own spin-off, consequences about wheat supply in the world, Then the noble thing you do is you save lives, emergency relief, food assistance in Ethiopia and the supply chain as well. So that tells us something. Now, supporting governments, of course. I just want to know the mechanics of, how you cooperate with governments, of course. It depends, but the records shows that in Ethiopia there is a good collaboration, I would say, between the government and WFP. How do you monitor, how do you constantly read each other, report to each other, in what ways and manner? Sort of briefly, so that the audience would know how you interact.
Okay, there is a very close collaboration in the planning of our assistance. Okay, so whatever activity we want to implement is part of a project that was designed, discussed, approved by our executive board, okay,
Yeah.
and the government of Ethiopia. So it means that whatever activities WFP wants to implement are activities that were agreed. Now, we discuss something today, maybe in 3 years' time, things may have evolved. And that's where this close collaboration does take place. So in whatever activities, whether it is the relief food distribution, which we will plan, coordinate closely with EDRMC, the Ethiopia Disaster Risk Management Commission, okay, and then discuss with them and the regional governments the numbers of people to assist, where they are, which quantities of food. So all of that is coordinated with EDRMC. If we want to take forward our nutrition programs, for instance, this is coordinated very closely with the Ministry of Health. Okay? If we want to implement our, let's say, school feeding activities or support the government through school feeding activities, we work closely with the Ministry of Education. So in those ministries, in some of them, we are actually even trying to help those ministries, sometimes by providing technical capacity, okay? Sometimes it could be some staff that we avail to work and coordinate with the ministries, okay? And whenever we can, sometimes when we deliver training, for instance, in some areas where WFP has expertise, we can avail those opportunities for some of our government counterparts, to take part in those training. And then I would say, sometimes financially, for instance, RRS that deals with the refugees, okay, we would support them with logistics, availing vehicles, so that it can also facilitate their work. These people are also helping us deliver our assistance, so in return, we also try to help them. But this is something that we also want to elevate, beyond the operational aspect. For instance, CDRMC, we have been working with them to set up, for instance, a system, an electronic computer system to manage food assistance, so that they can have tools that can help them be more efficient in the management of the food. So these are the kinds of technical, cooperation and exchanges that we do have with the various ministries.
These are very helpful, and they will bring definitely. It has dividends. It will make a difference, definitely.
It is really important.
Empowering
really
them with knowledge transfer and
because as
developing their skills.
Exactly. As I say, WFP will not be here forever. Yes. Okay. The government's aim is to take over some of these, tasks, which I think the government will take over. Yeah. But while we are here, while we can support with, some of our, food assistance, it is also important that, we can also support the government with other aspects that would be useful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now we are coming slowly to wrap up governments. Let's say the African continent. We have 55 countries now. Driver's seat is the government, and the initiative should be taken by the government. So one needs a good plan, one needs a good collaboration with WFP, and the like. When we look back in history, some Asian countries were hungry. They had famine. I don't want to name names, out of respect, Asian countries, which are now literally superpowers, rich countries, Japan, South Korea, in between the wars, after the war and the like. So that tells me that one can really end hunger, provided there is a commitment, the will, a good leadership, resolute, persistent, a patient one, and of course we are all in the same boat, humanity, helping each other. So given this, first let's look at Africa and then secondly Ethiopia. Generally, how do you see Africa resolving this problem as an expert with 30 years of experience and dealing with working day in and day out in critical countries, across the African continents, and also you were in Geneva as a liaison officer as well, There in your desk you'll have the entire world, If you could say a few words on that.
Yeah, I have not worked in a single African country where I was not convinced that the country had the capacities to take care of its own food needs. It's about the systems that need to be put in place. Every single African country, I believe, has the potential to take care of its own food needs. But it's about, we talked about some of it, the conflicts. Okay, there is no country that has developed itself within conflict. So that is something that I think it is important for everybody to always remember. I don't want to dwell into things that are more rather on the political side, but sometimes I ask myself, and I say people should ask themselves, okay, you may have good reasons to go for war, for a conflict, okay, but always think about what can you do, okay, to overcome the negative impacts of the conflict, okay, because what conflict creates is a huge disaster. A huge disaster.
Easy to destroy, but to build one needs time.
Yeah. So there is a need, obviously, of some commitment from not only our government, but also the people, so that we define those priorities. No developed country has developed without investing in its agriculture. You see, in our communities, the people that nobody considers is the farmer. But it should be the first person that we should consider, because that's the person who's producing for us to eat. Even if you have the money and there is no food, exactly, you cannot access.
It is the farmer, you mean, that shoulders the entire society.
Our farmers, I think, are important people. In many countries, you have these fairs every year where farmers are honored. Many African countries, we have many policies where we should be investing a certain level of our resources in agriculture, and we are not doing it necessarily. I think it is fundamental that we do invest in agriculture. And I say the role of WFP, okay, is to work itself out of its business. Let me be honest. As an African, I am not always proud to go and beg for money to feed Africans. I think we can do better in a number of instances. Of course, when there is conflict, when there is earthquake, when there is flooding, when there is drought, we want to make sure that we can come and assist. But I believe that beyond that, much more can be done. And that's what we try to work with governments that are committed to invest so that people can take care of themselves. And I also want to say that it is not only the government, but it is also the people. I also want, by the way, to call on you, the media. You also have a very important role to play. So really, whatever can be done, and I'm making this appeal, and we are discussing it with our government partners. Measures are being put in place. It's being taken up very proactively by the ministries concerned. But I think that it is important that it becomes everybody's fight, because this is a fight for children. This is a fight for the children of Ethiopia. The same, by the way, with some of the food that is also being sold in the market. And the thing is, Some people try to take advantage of the system. But what I say is, this food is being distributed because people need it. And in the coming years, in the coming months, the resources are going to diminish, because you talked about Ukraine, you talked about Yemen, you talked about Afghanistan, you talked about Somalia. There are needs all over. So the amount of money we're going to be receiving is going to be lower and lower. So let's make sure that the little we receive, the best use can be made of it. So people who are buying those food, please, 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 every time you buy that, you prevent a child from accessing the food.
Claude Jibidar, you are giving us, when I say us, me, the media, homework, really. The audience will appreciate your frankness with humility. That's what we need, literally. And even WFP is passionate. You are part of society. And when these things goes wrong, it's good not to bypass it. And of course, primarily, civic organizations, government organs, to the lowest Warada district level, should make sure that profiteers will not sell this food. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. We'll do our investigative journalism using, skills and with patience and skills. We'll make sure we'll work on some reportage on that. Thank you for addressing this. And it so happened I have an empirical evidence for malnutrition. In Africa has the highest prevalence of undernourishment in percentage terms, 21%. Asia with 418 million, and Africa 21%. This means millions of African kids, including Ethiopian children, are in very critical situations. And this milk and even high protein biscuits, I believe, and milk are critical to save lives. And this is really inhumane to make a few dollars or birr in Ethiopia, while some other kid, it could be my kid, your kid, as you have pointed out, would have died. Thank you for enlightening us. Yeah.
It's really, really important. As you noted, malnutrition is very high in Africa. It's not only about children, okay? Malnutrition, and one of the areas of our concern is also malnutrition in women who are pregnant and lactating, okay? Because the audience should know that a pregnant woman who is malnourished will deliver a baby that is malnourished. Not only will deliver a baby that is malnourished, but some of the vitamin deficiencies that the woman has may actually even impair the development and even the brain of your child before your child is born. So if your wife is malnourished for whatever reason, it is your child that is already malnourished. So this is really, really important. Obviously, when things become too critical, then we intervene with this food, what we call ready-to-use supplementary food, or ready-to-use, or corn soya blend, and so on. But fundamentally, many of these issues can be addressed through a diversified diet. And in Ethiopia, everything is there. Everything that does exist for people to have this diversified diet. So there is a lot of work to be done with the communities so that people learn to eat different types of food, because that makes them healthy.
Wonderful. Thank you for enlightening us. Thank you. Mr. Claude Jibidar, Ethiopia is at the moment, the Ethiopian government now, as an Ethiopian, we follow with interest what the government is doing. Yes, there are political issues, there are political conflicts here and there, lack of peace and stability, security is the issue. But also, politics is politics, and also focusing on food production. Ethiopia is rich. We have millions of hectares of land, fertile, virgin land even. Ethiopia can, I believe, sincerely, we can feed ourselves, provided we have the will. And for that, as I said earlier, the driver's seat should be the government, you know. And we are following the actions and plans and strategy of the government. One of the initiatives of Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed is, to plant this summer wheat, it's called, so that it can be planted three times at least, or 2 times a year, so that Ethiopia, in a very quick way, can feed it herself. Ethiopia will feed itself. I'm sure you might have followed this, and the hope is 10, 20 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, Ethiopia might be a net exporter rather than food importer. And who knows, WFP might reduce your office to a few skeleton staff. Why I'm saying this is, as far as I have investigated, the largest office in the whole African continent is in Ethiopia. Am I right? Your largest office. Yeah, it is the largest. This tells us something. This huge country called Ethiopia, we have problems, we have issues, conflict, war, peace, food deficiency, hunger, famine, drought, in Somalia, Kenya as well, in Ethiopia as well, as we speak now. And how do you see Ethiopia 5, 10 years down?
Okay, let me first talk about WFP. Yes, I mean, if I had a magical stick, okay, what I would do is, I would make sure that WFP has a very small office, and that office will be here to be buying food from Ethiopia to be sent to wherever we have emergencies in other countries. That's what I would like to see, because I believe that Ethiopia can obviously feed itself, because Ethiopia has capacity, as you've said. Ethiopia is a country of 120 million, the second largest country in Africa. Ethiopia has potential. Ethiopia, I think, holds the largest stock of livestock in Africa, okay? And you have water. You have water from the highlands. Okay, so it's all about how do we manage water so that it can be productive. Drought is all about water. What happens? You have drought, people don't have access to water, livestock dies, they don't have fodder, people who cultivate cannot cultivate, they lose everything, and then suddenly comes the rain, and there is flooding, like we have seen, okay? So it's all about managing water. And even though WFP is an agency that focuses on humanitarian relief and food, okay, I am advocate of ensuring that governments, and the government of Ethiopia in particularly, manages water, because there will not be food security if you don't manage water in the context of climate change. So if that happens in 5, 10 years, I believe that Ethiopia will be food secure, and that people will be able to advance towards development. You cannot advance towards development if you have a huge part of your population that wakes up every morning and needs to find something to eat. So I think it is really important. And I also want to believe that Ethiopia is central to the East African region, because of its size, because of its population. It can also, whatever happens to Ethiopia will affect all the other members.
Ethiopia tells, others might.
Exactly. And then lastly, for many of us Africans, Ethiopia is a bit of the history of Africa, okay? Be it through your culture, your religion, your history, okay? Ethiopia is very dear to many Africans. And then this is a place where all African countries come together. We have the African Union here. So we all have a dear interest in making sure that this country advances, and that this country plays a lead role in many aspects and many of the challenges that many other African countries are taking. So that's really my wish for Ethiopia. And WFP and all the WFP team here, we are really committed to try and provide, whatever little contribution we can have, to make it.
Very true. Very wise words indeed. Dear audience, there you have it, from the horse's mouth, I would say. Very wise words. And nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. Ethiopia can transform itself. And we are really committed as Ethiopians, caring for Ethiopia, seeing the light at the other side of the tunnel. It's possible. It's possible we can surmount our problem. But for that, we should be hard. We should work hard. We should work hard, discipline, and address the problem, solve the problem, not for mañana, not for tomorrow. That should be the case. My last question will be, of course, you live now in Ethiopia, a year exactly next month, in a week's time, a year. And do you feel comfortable in Ethiopia now? You have told me already you started as a toddler, way back. It's like your second coming you have shared with us. How about some food? You like Ethiopian food, some Ethiopian words? Okay, say kitfo or tips and...
You're asking me very private questions.
I know.
I have to tell you.
I have to ask you this.
Of course, I eat injera. I love the tips. Obviously. I always have, since I left Ethiopia in 1977, I have always had mitmita and berbere in my house. Everywhere I have gone, I've always had that.
Mitmita and berbere?
Yes. And I used to do my own dorowot.
Really? Wow,
but
great.
I cannot bring that dorowot to Ethiopia and say, this is the dorowot my way.
Your style, your way.
Okay. No, I have absolutely no problem with Ethiopian food. I very often, like dorowot. You cannot be in Ethiopia, don't eat injera.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Claude Jibidar, it was a joy having you, really. Thank you for sharing about your life, your work, your profession, and the noble deeds that WFP does. That's what it tells us, compared in other countries, the history itself tells us, and I wish you luck in the remainder of your term, engaged with Ethiopian people, government and society. Wish you all the best also. Stay healthy, stay blessed. And I do hope, and I do hope I'll see you on another occasion to have a chit chat, plus to have a conversation with you.
You're welcome. Anytime, Professor.
አመሰግናለሁ። በጣም አመሰግናለሁ። እሺ ስላሉ. Thanks for agreeing to be interviewed with you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that was the representative and the country director of the World Food Program, Mr. Claude Jibidar. We had a very lively and interesting, tangible and engaging conversation, I would say. We'll keep up, bringing for you such high-level diplomats and representatives, dear audience. And I do hope, you'll stay with us. Until next week, then, it's me, Professor Brooke Hailu Besha, from Diplomatic Corner, taking leave of you. I'll see you next time. Stay blessed, stay safe. Ladies and gentlemen, until I see you next time, next week, I'll say Dana koyun, au revoir, and goodbye until next time. Thank you for watching us.